The executioner's blade was already raised when the king's voice cut through the throne room. "Stop." Elowen Mordred closed her eyes, waiting for death. But when she opened them, Leopold wasn't looking at the axe, he was looking at her. The entire court held its breath as their ruthless king descended the throne steps, stopped inches from the traitor's daughter, and said 5 words that changed everything: "Prepare her for the wedding." What does a tyrant want with a bride he should have buried? Hello, lovely. You've just stepped into the kingdom of Valerus, where wedding vows are signed in blood and kings collect brides the way other men collect debts. This is Elowen's story, a girl who walked into the throne room expecting execution and walked out wearing a crown she never asked for. In these cold palace halls, mercy looks like cruelty, and the most dangerous thing isn't the king's wrath, it's discovering that the tyrant who stole your freedom might be the only one fighting to keep you alive. Every choice here carries weight. Every glance could mean survival or ruin. And sometimes, the man you're supposed to hate becomes the only one you can trust. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get started. The servants came for her at dawn, their faces blank as they stripped away her blood-stained prisoner's robe and replaced it with silk the color of fresh snow. Elowen stood motionless as they worked, her body present but her mind still trapped in that throne room, still hearing the king's voice cutting through the air like a blade: "Prepare her for the wedding." She'd expected chains. Instead, they brought her pearls. The gown was exquisite, layers of ivory lace and silk that whispered against stone floors as she walked. But beneath the beauty, Elowen felt the truth: this was a shroud dressed up as celebration. Her hands trembled as the maids fastened the final clasp, a collar of diamonds that felt more like a noose. "His Majesty awaits you in the chapel," the head maid said, her voice carefully neutral. The walk through the palace corridors felt endless. Guards lined the walls, their expressions as cold and unreadable as the stone around them. No one met her eyes. No one offered comfort. She was a ghost already, haunting halls that would soon become her tomb. The chapel doors loomed ahead, carved from black oak and inlaid with silver. When they opened, the scent of incense hit her, heavy, suffocating, mixed with something darker. Old stone. Old blood. Old sins. King Leopold stood at the altar, his back to her, dressed in black and gold that made him look like a god carved from shadow. He didn't turn when she entered. Didn't acknowledge her existence until she reached the steps and her knees nearly buckled. Only then did he look at her. His eyes were the color of winter storms, grey, cold, and absolutely merciless. They traveled over her face with the detached interest of a man inspecting livestock, and Elowen felt her spine stiffen. She wouldn't cower. Not for him. Not for anyone. "You didn't try to run," he said finally. His voice was low, controlled, each word precisely measured. "Where would I go?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "You'd hunt me down before I reached the gates." Something flickered in his expression, amusement, perhaps, or approval. "Smart girl." "I'm not a girl. I'm a prisoner." "No." He descended one step, closing the distance between them until she could see the fine scar along his jawline, the weariness hidden beneath his authority. "You're about to become a queen. A queen in a gilded cage is still a captive. And a dead rebel is still dead." His hand shot out, gripping her chin and forcing her to meet his gaze. "I could have given you to the executioner. I could have let the court tear you apart for entertainment. Instead, I'm giving you a crown. The question you should be asking yourself isn't why I'm doing this, it's what you're willing to do to survive it." He released her and turned back to the altar, signaling the priest forward. "Shall we begin, Lady Elowen? Or would you prefer the axe after all?" Elowen's hands curled into fists beneath her bouquet of white roses. She stepped forward, her voice cutting through the sacred silence. "Let's get this over with, Your Majesty." Leopold's smile was cold as winter. "That's my bride." The ceremony lasted less than 10 minutes. No celebration followed. No toasts or well wishes from gathered nobles. Just silence, signatures, and the metallic scratch of a quill across parchment as Elowen signed her name beneath Leopold's, not in ink, but in her own blood, drawn by a ceremonial blade the priest produced with practiced ease. The moment the contract was sealed, Leopold dismissed the court with a single gesture. They scattered like crows, leaving Elowen alone with her new husband in the echoing chapel. "Your chambers are in the west wing," he said, already turning away. "A guard will escort you." "That's it." The words escaped before she could stop them. "No wedding feast?" "No. This isn't a celebration, Elowen. It's a transaction." He paused at the door, his profile sharp against the candlelight. "And transactions don't require festivities." She was taken to a suite of rooms that would have been breathtaking under different circumstances. Silk tapestries lined the walls, depicting battles and coronations from centuries past. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in burgundy velvet. But the windows were barred with decorative iron, and when she tested the door after the guard left, she found it locked from the outside. A gilded cage, just as she predicted. Hours passed. Elowen paced the room like a caged animal, her wedding gown growing heavier with each passing minute. She'd just begun to believe he'd abandoned her entirely when the door opened without warning. Leopold entered, still in his ceremonial attire, though he'd removed the crown. He looked tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from years rather than hours. "You're still wearing that," he observed, gesturing to her gown. "I wasn't given anything else." He moved to an ornate wardrobe and pulled out a simple nightdress, tossing it onto the bed. "Change. We need to talk. Turn around." His eyebrow arched. "We're married. And I still have dignity." To her surprise, he turned his back. Elowen changed quickly, hyper-aware of his presence, of the vulnerability of the moment. When she was done, he faced her again, his expression unreadable. "Sit." He gestured to the chairs by the fireplace. She remained standing. "If you're expecting." "I'm expecting you to listen." His voice was iron. "This marriage wasn't my first choice. It was my only choice. The council wanted your entire family executed as a warning to other rebels. I convinced them that a strategic marriage would be more effective, binding the Mordred name to the crown, turning enemies into allies. You didn't save me. You bought me. I saved your life and the lives of everyone bearing your family's name. Whether you see that as salvation or ownership is irrelevant." He moved closer, his grey eyes boring into hers. "But understand this, in this castle, you have no allies. The nobles despise you for your family's treason. The servants fear association with you. The council tolerates you only because I command it. Then I have nothing. You have me." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. "And that means you have everything, or the illusion of it, which is just as powerful. But you need to understand the game being played here. Every smile you receive hides a dagger. Every kind word is a test. Every moment of peace is borrowed time." Elowen's throat tightened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because in this castle, your only friend is the man you hate." Leopold's expression didn't soften, but something shifted in his gaze, a flicker of something almost human. "And if you want to survive what's coming, you'll learn to trust me, even if you can't bring yourself to forgive me." He turned toward the door, then paused. "The door will remain locked. Not to trap you, but to protect you. Sleep well, wife. Tomorrow, your real education begins." The door closed behind him, and Elowen was alone once more, her husband's warning echoing in the silence. The locked door became Elowen's obsession. For 3 days, she was a prisoner in silken velvet, served meals by silent maids who wouldn't meet her eyes and guarded by men who treated her like a dangerous artifact. Leopold didn't return. No explanations. No visits. Just endless, suffocating solitude. On the 4th morning, she woke to find the door unlocked. No note. No guard stationed outside. Just an open door and an implicit test. Would she run, or would she stay? Elowen chose a third option. She explored. The west wing was a labyrinth of abandoned rooms and forgotten corridors. Dust-coated surfaces that servants clearly hadn't touched in years. She moved through the silence like a ghost, searching for something, anything, that might explain the man who'd claimed her life. She found it behind a tapestry in what appeared to be a disused study. The hidden door was barely visible, its seams blending into the stone. But Elowen's fingers found the catch, and it swung open to reveal a small chamber lit by a single high window. Inside, a desk buried under maps, ledgers, and journals written in Leopold's precise hand. She knew she shouldn't look. Knew this was exactly the kind of curiosity that could get her killed. She looked anyway. The first journal detailed troop movements along the northern border, but the numbers were alarming. Where there should have been thousands of soldiers, there were hundreds. Entire garrisons reduced to skeleton crews. The second revealed the kingdom's treasury, not the wealth of a thriving monarchy, but debts stacked upon debts, loans from foreign powers that came with impossible terms. But it was the map that made her blood run cold. The kingdom of Valerus was marked in sections, each labeled with a noble house's name. Beside each name, dates, accusations, evidence of conspiracy. Nearly every major house was highlighted in red ink, traitors, all of them, slowly circling the throne like wolves waiting for the kill. Including her own family's name, circled multiple times, with annotations in Leopold's hand, rebellion funded by Duchess Carmine. Evidence, intercepted letters, witness testimony, weapons cache discovered in Mordred estate cellars. Her father's treason hadn't been a desperate act of rebellion. It had been orchestrated, funded, used as a pawn in someone else's game to destabilize the crown. I wondered how long it would take you to find this place. Elowen spun, heart hammering, to find Leopold leaning against the door frame. He didn't look angry, just resigned, as if he'd been expecting this exact moment. "You left the door unlocked on purpose," she said. "I needed to know if you were clever enough to survive here. Clearly, you are." He entered the room, moving to stand beside her at the desk. "So now you know. The kingdom isn't thriving under my tyranny, it's hemorrhaging from 1,000 cuts, and I'm the only thing standing between Valerus and total collapse. My family was being used. Just like half the noble houses in this kingdom." His finger traced the map's web of conspiracies. "The Duchess wants my throne. She's been systematically turning my own lords against me, funding rebellions, creating chaos. Your father's uprising was supposed to be the final push, the spark that would justify a council vote to remove me. Then why marry me? Why not just expose them all?" Leopold's smile was bitter. "Because I need proof that will hold in court, and the only way to get it is to make them think I'm weak. A king distracted by a beautiful enemy bride, losing his edge, becoming sentimental." He turned to face her fully. "They're waiting for me to fail, Elowen. And you're going to help me give them exactly what they expect. I don't understand." "You will." His hand covered hers on the map, his touch surprisingly warm. "Because starting tomorrow, you and I are going to play the most dangerous game of our lives. And if we lose, we both die." The ballroom glittered like a trap set with diamonds. Elowen stood at the top of the grand staircase, her hand resting lightly on Leopold's arm, feeling the weight of 100 hostile stares. Her gown was deep sapphire tonight, chosen by the king himself, a statement of ownership that made her skin crawl even as she understood its necessity. "Smile," Leopold murmured, his voice too low for anyone else to hear. "You're madly in love with your tyrant husband, remember? I'd rather be back in my cell. You will be, if you don't sell this performance." His hand tightened fractionally on hers. "The Duchess is watching. Third balcony, left side. Don't look directly at her." Elowen kept her expression serene as they descended, though her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the woman who'd orchestrated her family's destruction, who'd turned her father into a puppet and her name into a curse. The moment they reached the ballroom floor, the vultures descended. "Your Majesty," purred a woman in crimson silk, her smile sharp as cut glass. "You must introduce us to your charming bride." The pause before the charming was deliberate, poisonous. Lady Seraphine, Leopold's voice was ice. My wife, Queen Elowen. Queen. Seraphine's eyes raked over Elowen with undisguised contempt. How unexpected. We'd all assumed His Majesty would choose someone with a more appropriate bloodline. My bloodline is ancient, Elowen replied, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. Perhaps older than your family's purchased title, Lady Seraphine. The woman's face flushed, but before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. Now. Let's not squabble at such a lovely celebration. A man stepped forward, handsome, golden-haired, his smile practiced and empty. Lord Theron, according to Leopold's briefings. Your Majesty looks radiant tonight. Quite different from the terrified girl we saw in the throne room. Desperation has a way of transforming people, Elowen said sweetly. As does survival. Indeed. His eyes glittered with something ugly. Though one wonders how long such survival will last. The king has a history with brides who displease him. Leopold's hand moved to Elowen's waist, pulling her closer, a gesture that looked possessive but felt protective. Careful, Theron. My wife is under my protection. Insult her, and you insult me. Of course, Your Majesty. No offense intended. But his smirk said otherwise. The evening became an endurance test. Every conversation was mined with hidden barbs. Every compliment concealed mockery. Elowen met each attack with steel wrapped in silk, watching Leopold from the corner of her eye as he maneuvered through the social battlefield with deadly precision. Then the Duchess made her move. She appeared like a vision in gold, her beauty legendary, her power absolute. Duchess Carmine had been Leopold's father's lover, some whispered. Others claimed she'd been promised the throne herself before Leopold took it. Dance with me, she said to Leopold, ignoring Elowen entirely. I'm occupied, Leopold replied. Your little wife won't mind, will you, dear? The Duchess's smile was venomous. After all, she should learn her place. Kings take many companions. Queens simply endure. Elowen's fingernails bit into her palms, but before she could respond, Leopold did something unexpected. He pulled Elowen onto the dance floor himself, leaving the Duchess standing alone. What are you doing? Elowen whispered as they began to waltz. Showing them you're not disposable. His hand was firm at her waist, guiding her through the steps. The Duchess just revealed her hand, she's testing whether I value you or merely tolerate you. And your answer? His grey eyes met hers, and for a moment, something real flickered behind the mask. My answer is that they'll have to kill me before they touch you. The ballroom watched them spin across the floor, the Tyrant King and his rebel bride, and Elowen realized that somewhere between the threats and the survival, the performance had started to feel dangerously real. The assassination attempt came during dinner. One moment, Elowen was pushing food around her plate in the private dining room Leopold insisted they share. The next, a servant lunged across the table, blade flashing in candlelight, aimed directly at the king's throat. Leopold moved with brutal efficiency, catching the man's wrist and twisting until bone cracked. The knife clattered to the floor. Guards flooded the room, dragging the screaming assassin away, but not before Elowen saw the Duchess's crest tattooed on his inner wrist. Are you hurt? Leopold's voice was controlled, but his hands trembled slightly as he straightened his collar. No. You? I'm fine. But he wasn't. A thin line of blood seeped through his shirt where the blade had grazed him. You're bleeding. It's nothing. Let me see. Elowen. Let me see, or I'll call the physician and make this far more humiliating for you. Something like amusement flickered across his face before he sighed and unbuttoned his shirt. The cut was shallow, barely worth mentioning. But it wasn't the wound that made Elowen's breath catch. It was the scars. They covered his chest and back in a brutal map of violence, some old and silvered, others relatively fresh. Whip marks. Burn scars. What looked like a blade wound that had nearly killed him, jagged and vicious across his ribs. "My father's work," Leopold said quietly, watching her face. He believed pain built character. That a king needed to understand suffering to rule effectively. His laugh was hollow. Ironic, considering he was the one inflicting it. Elowen's hands moved without conscious thought, fingertips tracing the worst of the scars. "How old were you when he started?" 7. When he died? 23. 16 years of his particular brand of education. He caught her wrist gently. "Don't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like I'm something broken that needs fixing." "You are broken," she said softly. "We both are. This whole kingdom is broken." Leopold's eyes searched hers, and she saw past the tyrant, past the cold mask he wore for the court. She saw a boy who'd been tortured by his own father, a man who'd inherited a dying kingdom and a throne soaked in blood, someone who'd learned that showing weakness meant death. "Is that why you're so cold?" she asked. "Why you trust no one?" "I trusted once. My younger brother." His jaw tightened. "He was the one who told our father where I hid when the beatings got too bad. Thought it would earn him favor, make him the heir instead. He was 8 years old and already knew how to weaponize loyalty. Where is he now?" "Dead. Killed in a hunting accident 3 years ago." Leopold's expression was unreadable. "Or so the official report says." The implication hung between them, dark and heavy. "You didn't." "I didn't have to. The Duchess did it for me, trying to eliminate competition for influence over the throne. That's when I realized the throne wasn't mine to hold, it was mine to survive." He pulled away, rebuttoning his shirt with practiced movements. "Everyone in this palace is playing their own game, Elowen. Trust is a luxury neither of us can afford. Then why tell me this? Why show me?" He paused at the door, his back to her. "Because you asked. And because for some godforsaken reason, I find myself wanting you to understand that the monster they fear isn't the man I wanted to become, it's the man I had to become to stay alive." The door closed behind him, leaving Elowen alone with the knowledge that the Tyrant King was just another prisoner in this palace of thorns, and she was starting to care far more than was safe. The council meeting was supposed to be routine. Elowen had been invited as a courtesy, or more accurately, as a display of Leopold's supposed weakness, parading his rebel bride before the men who despised her family. She sat in silence, watching the political theatre unfold. Lord Theron argued for increased taxes on the lower provinces. The Duchess advocated for redirecting military resources. Leopold listened with that unreadable expression she'd come to recognize as dangerous. Then the wine was served. It was tradition, apparently. Each council session ended with a toast to the crown's prosperity. The servants poured from crystal decanters, filling goblets with dark red wine that caught the light like liquid rubies. Elowen noticed the servant's hand trembling as he poured Leopold's cup. It was subtle, a slight shake, a bead of sweat on his temple despite the cool chamber. She'd spent weeks watching palace staff move with mechanical precision. This man was terrified. Her eyes flicked to his cup, then to the others. Different decanter. Different color, barely perceptible, but there. Leopold's wine had a slightly purple tint that the others lacked. Everyone raised their goblets. Leopold's hand moved toward his. Elowen didn't think. She acted. Her hand shot out, knocking the cup from the table. It shattered on the marble floor, wine spreading like blood across white stone. The room went silent. "What the hell?" Leopold started. "Don't." Elowen's voice was steel. She pointed at the trembling servant. "Check his pockets." The guards moved instantly. They found the vial of poison within seconds, nightshade, enough to kill a man in minutes. The servant began screaming, begging for mercy, naming the Duchess as his patron before they dragged him away. The Duchess stood, her face a mask of outrage. "This is absurd. The girl is clearly trying to manufacture drama. Get out." Leopold's voice was quiet, Deadly. All of you. Now. The council scattered like roaches in sunlight. Only Elowen remained, her hand shaking now that the moment had passed. Leopold stared at the spilled wine, then at her. You saved my life. Don't sound so surprised. We're in this together, remember? You could have let me drink it. Become a widow, claim the throne yourself, had your revenge for everything I've taken from you. He moved closer, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Why didn't you? Because, she stopped, unsure how to articulate the truth. Because somewhere between being your prisoner and your wife, I realized I don't want you dead. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Leopold's hand came up slowly, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything she knew about him. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and she realized she was crying without knowing when she'd started. I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who want me dead or want to use me, he said quietly. You're the first person who had every reason to want both and chose neither. Don't make me regret it. His laugh was rough, almost broken. I'll try not to. He stepped closer, his forehead resting against hers. But I need you to understand something, Elowen. What you did today, it changed the game. The Duchess knows you're not just a trophy anymore. You're an obstacle. And she eliminates obstacles. Then we eliminate her first. We? His eyes held hers, and something shifted in his expression, something that looked dangerously like hope. You're choosing my side. I'm choosing survival. If you die, I die. If you fall, I fall. She pulled back just enough to meet his gaze fully. So yes, Your Majesty. We. For the first time since she'd known him, Leopold smiled, a real smile, not the cold mockery he showed the court. Then let's go to war, my queen. The letter arrived in the dead of night, slipped under Elowen's door by an unknown hand. No seal, no signature, just cramped handwriting on cheap parchment that made her stomach drop the moment she began reading. Sister, if you're reading this, I'm likely already dead. Father was never the leader of our rebellion, he was a puppet. The Duchess has been funding our family's resistance for years, using us to destabilize Leopold's reign. But now she's planning something bigger. A coup during the spring festival. They're going to use our family name one last time, then eliminate every Mordred who knows the truth. Get out while you can. Trust no one. Your brother, Caspian. Elowen's hand shook as she read it again. And again. Her brother, who she'd thought died in the initial rebellion. Alive. Warning her. Confirming her worst fears. She found Leopold in his war room, bent over maps in the dim candlelight. He looked up when she entered, and whatever he saw in her face made him straighten immediately. What happened? She handed him the letter without a word. He read it in silence, his expression darkening with each line. When did this arrive? An hour ago. I had the guards check the corridor, no one saw who delivered it. The spring festival is in 3 days. Leopold's jaw tightened. That's not enough time to root out all the conspirators, not without tipping our hand. There's more. Elowen's voice cracked. I need to show you something. She led him back to her chambers, to the hidden compartment in her writing desk she discovered weeks ago. Inside, letters written in her father's hand, addressed to the Duchess. Letters detailing troop movements, weak points in Leopold's security, even suggestions for how to turn public opinion against the crown. My father wasn't coerced, she whispered, staring at the evidence of his treason. He volunteered. He believed in the cause, believed Leopold was a tyrant who needed to be removed. And he used our entire family as soldiers in someone else's war. Leopold gathered the letters carefully, his movements controlled. Elowen. Don't. She turned away, unable to bear the look in his eyes. Don't tell me it's not my fault. Don't tell me I'm not responsible for what my family did. I was going to say I'm sorry. His voice was soft, almost tender. I'm sorry you had to learn that the people who were supposed to protect you were willing to sacrifice you instead. The tears came then, hot and bitter. I've spent my entire life believing my family were heroes. That we stood for justice, for the people, against tyranny. But we were just pawns. Useful idiots for someone else's ambition. Leopold's arms came around her from behind, pulling her against his chest. She should have pushed him away. Should have maintained the distance that kept her safe. Instead, she turned and buried her face against his shoulder, letting herself break in the only place that felt remotely secure. They used me, she said into his shirt. The Duchess used my family to get to you, and my father let her because he believed his own righteousness mattered more than our lives. I know. His hand stroked her hair, the gesture awkward but genuine. I know what it's like to be betrayed by blood. To realize the people who should love you see you as nothing more than a tool. She pulled back to look at him, seeing her own pain reflected in his eyes. What do we do? We spring the trap before they do. His expression hardened into something dangerous. Your brother says they're planning the coup during the festival. Fine. Let them come. But this time, we'll be ready. And my family? The Mordreds who are still alive. Leopold's hands framed her face, forcing her to hold his gaze. Anyone who had no knowledge of the plot will be spared. I promise you that. But the conspirators, including any of your relatives involved, they face justice. Even if it destroys what's left of my family name. Your family name was destroyed the moment they chose treason. But you, his thumb brushed away her tears. You have a chance to build something new. Not as a Mordred. As my queen. Elowen closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice before her. Her blood family or her chosen future. The lie she'd been raised on or the brutal truth she'd discovered. Then let's finish this, she whispered. Together. The spring festival began with music and ended with screams. Elowen was in the great hall when the first explosion shattered the eastern wall. Nobles scattered like frightened birds as armed rebels poured through the breach, their faces covered, their weapons gleaming in the firelight spreading from the blast. Leopold's hand found hers in the chaos. The escape tunnel, now. What about? The guards know the protocol. Move! He pulled her toward a concealed door behind the throne, but they'd barely reached it when a second explosion rocked the palace. The ceiling groaned, stones raining down, and Leopold shoved her against the wall, his body shielding hers as debris crashed where they'd been standing. We're cut off, he said, breathing hard. His hand came away from his temple bloody. The tunnels collapsed. More rebels flooded the hall. Leopold drew his sword with one hand, keeping Elowen behind him with the other. Stay close to me. Don't let go of my hand. They fought their way through the palace corridors, Leopold cutting down attackers with brutal efficiency while Elowen grabbed a fallen blade and proved she wasn't the helpless bride anyone expected. She'd grown up with brothers who believed every Mordred should know how to fight, training that now kept her alive. They reached the war room, barricading the door behind them. Leopold moved immediately to the weapons cache, tossing Elowen a better sword and a dagger. There's a secondary passage, he said, pointing to the map. It leads to the stables. You can make it to the northern border by dawn if you ride hard. Elowen stared at him. You're not coming. I'm the target. The longer I stay, the longer you have to escape. No. Elowen, this isn't negotiable. You're right. It's not. She moved to stand beside him, sword ready. I'm not leaving you to die alone in this palace while I run like a coward. You'd be smart, not a coward. Then I choose to be foolish. She met his eyes, saw the protest forming, and cut it off. You told me once that in this castle, my only friend was the man I hate. Well, I don't hate you anymore, Leopold. And I won't abandon the only person who's ever chosen to protect me instead of use me. Something broke in his expression, the last wall between them crumbling. If you stay, you could die. If I leave, you will die. I'd rather take my chances here. She gripped his hand. Together, remember. A crash against the door made them both turn. The barricade wouldn't hold much longer. Leopold pulled her close, his kiss fierce and desperate and full of everything they'd both been too afraid to say. When he pulled back, his eyes burned with something that looked like devotion. Then we make our stand here, my queen. And if we fall together. Elowen raised her sword as the door splintered. But let's try not to fall at all. The door burst open, and the rebels flooded in. But this time, they faced a king who had something worth fighting for, and a queen who'd finally found something worth dying for. The battle for Valerus had begun, and neither of them would surrender without a fight. Through the chaos, Elowen caught glimpses of familiar faces among the attackers, distant cousins, family retainers, people who wore the Mordred crest. Her own blood, come to kill the king she'd sworn to protect. She didn't hesitate. When a rebel lunged at Leopold's unprotected side, she was there, blade meeting blade, her voice ringing clear, for the crown. Leopold fought beside her with deadly precision, their movements synchronizing as if they'd trained together for years instead of weeks. Back to back, they held the war room against impossible odds, refusing to yield even as reinforcements seemed impossibly far away. "I love you," Leopold said suddenly, between sword strikes. "If we don't survive this, I needed you to know." Elowen blocked an attack, her blade singing. "Tell me again when we win. I want to hear it without the sound of dying in the background." His laugh was breathless, almost joyful despite everything. "As my queen commands." The palace bells began to ring, Leopold's loyal forces finally mounting their counterattack. The tide was turning, but the war room was still surrounded, and neither of them knew if rescue would come in time. The sun rose over a palace stained with blood and ash. Elowen stood in what remained of the great hall, her wedding gown, the one she'd worn to the festival, torn and filthy, her hands bandaged from sword work. Around her, servants worked to clear rubble while guards dragged prisoners toward the dungeons. They'd won. Barely. The Duchess had been captured trying to flee through the servant quarters, her golden gown splattered with evidence of her crimes. The remaining conspirators, including 3 of Elowen's distant cousins, were chained in the courtyard, awaiting judgment. Leopold found her standing among the ruins, staring at the destroyed throne that had started this entire war. "The stonemasons say it can be rebuilt," he said quietly. "Everything can be rebuilt. The question is whether it should be." She turned to face him, taking in the bandage across his ribs, the exhaustion etched into his features. "How many dead?" 43 palace guards. 16 servants. 28 nobles who sided with us." His jaw tightened. "The rebel casualties are higher. And the prisoners? Awaiting trial. All of them." He paused. "Including your family?" Elowen nodded, feeling nothing. She'd watched her cousin try to kill Leopold, had crossed blades with blood relatives who saw her as a traitor. Whatever familial loyalty she'd once felt had died in the flames of their betrayal. Leopold stepped closer, his expression carefully neutral. "I've been thinking about our arrangement." Her heart clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "Have you? This marriage was forced on you. A transaction to save your family, a family that's now proven itself your enemy as much as mine." He reached into his coat, pulling out a folded document. "I had the court scribes draw this up. An annulment. Legal, binding, with full restoration of your rights and titles. You'd be Lady Elowen Mordred again, free to leave the palace, free to rebuild your life however you choose." She stared at the parchment, not taking it. "You're offering me freedom. I'm offering you choice. The one thing I never gave you before." His grey eyes held hers, and she saw the truth there. This was costing him everything. "You've proven yourself a dozen times over. You don't owe me loyalty, and you certainly don't owe me love. If you want to leave, I won't stop you." Elowen looked at the document, then at the man holding it. The tyrant who'd terrified her. The king who'd protected her. the husband who'd fought beside her and told her he loved her while the world burned around them. She took the annulment from his hand and tore it in half. I don't want freedom from you, Leopold. I want partnership with you. She stepped closer, her hands finding his. This marriage started as a chain, but somewhere along the way, it became the only thing anchoring me in a world designed to destroy me. You're not my jailer anymore. You're my equal. My ally. You're what? His voice was rough, hopeful. My choice. She rose on her toes, kissing him with all the certainty she'd found in the ashes of her old life. I choose you. Not because I'm forced to, not because I have nowhere else to go, but because I love you. And because ruling beside you is the only future I want. Leopold's arms came around her, crushing her against him. You're certain? Because once you choose this, there's no going back. You'll be tied to me, to this broken kingdom, to all the battles still to come. I know. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. And I'm choosing it anyway. All of it. You and me, together, rebuilding what was destroyed and creating something better. Then we do it right this time. He reached up, unpinning what remained of her torn veil. No contract signed in blood. No forced vows. Just you and me, choosing each other. A real wedding. A real marriage. A real partnership. His smile was soft, genuine, everything she'd never thought the Tyrant King capable of. What do you say, Lady Elowen? Will you marry me again, this time because you want to? She laughed through sudden tears. Yes. 1,000 times yes. They stood among the ruins of the old kingdom, two people who'd been forced together by blood and necessity, now bound by something far stronger, choice, trust, and a love forged in fire. The Tyrant King and his rebel queen, ready to build a new Valerus from the ashes of the old. Together.